today to talk about new member onboarding campaigns through marketing automation. And I am just pleased to be joined by Jonathan Cooper, who's the Communications Manager from NAES. NAES is a longtime client, and it's amazing what this small but mighty organization has been able to do. Jonathan, say hello.
Hello, thank you for having me here.
Awesome. So we have a lot to cover. So we're diving right in. We are recording this session. We know that there's going to be lots and lots of learnings from this webinar. So we'll be sending you the slides and the recording in the next 48 hours. And you'll see from the slides that Jonathan and Leah, actually, who's my director of marketing, have really taken the time to give you screenshots of some of these emails and annotated them so you can see, the intention and the thought that's gone into them. So we're muting everyone. If you have questions, put them in Zoom. If you're having trouble, put them in Zoom or give us a call. Obviously, if you can't get into Zoom. For those of you who got into the Zoom, great, you can chat us. If there's overflow, people are going into YouTube. So, thank you very much for joining us. If you've got questions after the webinar, please post them on our Facebook page, tweet us. We'll also be providing contact information at the end of the slides, and give us some love on social. So many of you are familiar with Matrix Group, but for those of you who are not, we're a digital agency. We're based in Arlington, Virginia, although honestly today we're based out of everywhere, because everyone's working from home and people are scattered. But here's, we've been in business over 20 years, and we work with associations that hire us to solve these 4 problems. Increase membership or reverse decline, retain members, reach new audiences with a clear brand, and then increase staff productivity with a streamlined and integrated membership database and a back office. So, a lot of times with our clients, they tell us that what we do is we help them, really increase membership and generate revenue.
Book is done.
Okay, can you go talk to your dad? Okay. Okay. Thanks. Sorry. The 9-year-old has just gained his internet back because he's done all of his homework. So here are our services. I won't go into all of them, but it always starts out with what your goals are, who you're trying to reach, what are you trying to do, what does success look like, and then these are our different services. So if you are looking to develop a new social strategy, redesign your website, if you feel like your website isn't effective enough, if you'd like to integrate a bunch of your systems, or you're in the market for a new membership database, we hope that you'll give us a call. And then at the end of this, we'll actually give you a 30-second spiel on a new virtual meeting platform that we have that is full-featured and integrates with your database for single identity. So also want to talk to you just a little bit about Matrix Max, since we are talking about Matrix Max today. Now, this webinar is platform agnostic. NAES uses Matrix Max as their association management software. They also use MailChimp for their emails as well as their marketing automation. But the lessons that we're going to be talking about today really are agnostic. But in case you're curious, so Matrix Max is it's an association management software program that really ties together all of your systems. Beautiful interface, very affordable, and really kind of our goal is to help associations be better. We don't just implement the software, but what we do is, just like with our custom work, we really ask the question, what are you trying to achieve and how can we make the association better? Jonathan, tell us about NAES.
Sure, I'll skip the blurb for time, but basically we are the association that serves schools that are either operated or affiliated with the Episcopal Church. And so that includes large schools, small schools, all schools.
And Jonathan, you're a trade association, and you've got people at all levels in the schools really kind of interacting with the organization. But you've also got the sponsoring churches, right, as well as the trustees that interact with you. So you've got a very, very diverse audience that you are catering to. Right. So here's our agenda. Talking about why new member onboarding is even important. Then we're really going to dive into the NAES member journey, their transition from physical to digital onboarding, and then talk about why it's been so successful to them. And Jonathan's going to share his tips for how they made it great. So why new member onboarding, right? I mean, some folks have said, well, I've got a new member onboarding campaign. When someone becomes a member, they get a thank you email, and then they get a packet, and then they start getting our newsletter. So for us, new member onboarding is so critical no matter what it looks like, right? And what we have found is that the first 90 days are really the most critical for a new member. And in fact, some folks would actually argue that it's the first 30 days. And why is that? It's because when they first become a member, that's when they're most excited about the organization. They've made the decision to join, and they've made the decision to somehow interact with you. Now, granted, for some organizations, they've made the decision to join because they're going to get a discount to the meeting, or they're going to get a discount on some publication that they want. But this is your opportunity. You're top of mind right now. This is your opportunity to kind of welcome them into the fold, thank them for becoming a member, and really set the tone for the entire member experience. This is also the time, frankly, when they're most likely to open your emails. And early in the journey, if they're opening up your emails, then their email system is going to say, oh, these emails, you want to read them, so I'm going to prioritize them. I'm not going to throw them into updates, hopefully not throwing them into spam, et cetera. And what you're doing is you're really kind of setting the tone and saying, these are our expectations of you as a member. Come on down, and here are intentional ways that you can engage with us, our association. We think about it as hosting a dinner party with a first-time guest or a person who is attending a conference for the first time. We say, don't assume they know everything about your organization. Do not assume that they know how to navigate your organization and services. How many times have you interacted with a member who's been a member for maybe 2-3 years? They ask you a question and you say, oh, we've got X. And they say, oh gosh, I didn't know you did that. I didn't know you had this salary guide. I didn't know that you've got this consulting service. I didn't know that you've got a special conference just for people like me. And you'll kind of, palm on forehead and say, oh God, how did you miss that? Well, for so many reasons, right? Maybe it was something that hadn't been covered in any of your emails. Maybe they missed that email. Maybe the campaign to promote that product had just ended when they joined. So what you want to do is really, for these first-time members, both introduce and reintroduce the organization and everything that you have to offer, and really help them to navigate the organization. So Jonathan, why don't you tell us about your technology ecosystem, because it's so important to your new member cultivation, and actually to your prospect cultivation as well.
Sure. So, as Joanna mentioned, our association management platform is Matrix Max. We're using MailChimp for our marketing. And you'll see some more of that in a second. Our two new platforms that we're using. So we had been on Sitefinity. We just launched with Matrix's guidance and wonderful designs a new WordPress site. So you can check that out at episcopalschools.org. And we also just launched a new community through HireLogic.
And coincidentally, Jonathan, maybe not a coincidence, one of the things that you told me after, once the lockdown happened, you said, wow, how fortuitous for NAES that you had just launched this new website that gives you a lot of flexibility, and you just launched these communities, and you feel like as all of your members suddenly went remote, that both of these tools really help you and your members navigate this new environment.
Absolutely.
So. All right, so tell us about the member journey.
Sure. So our principal members are schools.
Sorry. Oops, sorry.
Each of those schools, the majority of them are also sponsored by a church, often, sometimes a diocese or a seminary or cathedral or something, but most of the time it's a church. So our members are schools, but churches by extension get that, our members too. The decision makers are predominantly lying with the school as well, but again, since those churches have a high stake in the membership, sometimes it'll be a decision maker from the church that calls that. Our most sort of significant member benefits, really, I think, at least this is somewhat subjectively my opinion, but I think our most important offerings are our events. One of the things that has sort of proven to be time and time again, our biennial conference was our main event, is sort of the moment at which someone switches from being a sort of casual member to being, oh, I get it. And so our our principal offerings all geared around events, which has been, obviously an interesting situation given that everything is virtual now. But we also offer, we have an extensive resource library. We have the online community. We offer consulting. And so it's a pretty broad gamut, but we try and offer something for everyone. A lot of the time, sometimes our most engaged members are actually not decision makers, which can be tricky, and I'll get into that a little bit later as well. Anyway, Joanna, I'll hand it back to you actually. But
yeah. So, just something about NAES, every time we're doing a project, and we've been working with NAES for a long time, we like to interview the members, and we like to interview the staff. And what we have heard from their members, and certainly from the analytics, is that Jonathan is absolutely right. The biannual conference is a signature event. What we're told is when they attend biannual, they become members for life. But the other thing is they really value the network. And it's National Association of Episcopal Schools, and NAES isn't necessarily teaching them how to run their schools. They're teaching them how to run Episcopal schools. So NAES has these wonderful resources on what it means to be an Episcopal school, what it means to have Episcopal identity. And I know, for example, my son, my 9-year-old, attends an Episcopal school, and one of their associate directors is not Episcopal, and so he says that he's really relied on the resources from NAES to really guide him and his decision making, around what it means to be in a school, to be a school with an Episcopal identity. So it's a neat organization. So Jonathan, what you used to do when new schools became members, or when new schools kind of entered your orbit, right?
Yeah. So when a new school joins, we have sort of a welcome packet that goes out. In terms of our sort of onboarding process, that was I just wanted to just add this little clarification. So the onboarding that we're actually doing and discussing here is this was basically, we would send a packet out to new heads of school and new chaplains, both members and non-members. And so it was really targeting transitions in leadership, both because that's an opportunity to get a new member, and also it is a time when you get a new leader at an organization and they're weighing up, is this the best use of my budget? So we wanted to get get ourselves in touch with those people at the moments of transition. So our old onboarding process was basically a large paper mailing that consisted of flyers, a welcome letter, some sample publications, really good stuff, but all in one sort of big envelope. And it's labor intensive. It's a little overwhelming because, especially if you're a new, leader in an organization, everyone is sending you a whole bunch of stuff, and you're also trying to get accustomed to a new organization, a new job, and so that was one of the drawbacks of that paper approach.
Brian, somebody just raised their hand. Is there a question?
I don't see anything as of yet.
Okay. I guess it says Piyush Jain raised hand. So Piyush, if you've got a question, go ahead and put it in Q&A or chat, and we'll get to you. So one thing that I just want to kind of mention here is, think about this. So NAES is cultivating not just new members, but they're cultivating the new staff at member companies and non-member schools. So if I'm a head at a non-member school and I've just joined the organization, again, think about this. It's a time when I'm kind of navigating my new environment. NAES comes in with useful resources for helping me to run my school, specifically to run my Episcopal school, and how welcome and kind of useful does NAES really appear to be? And NAES also doesn't really, if you talk to their leadership, if you look at their website, they're not really locking down everything and making it available just to the members. They're really working to make the Episcopal school community better as a whole. So Jonathan, there was a problem with this onboarding process, and it was pretty big.
So actually, and so the one thing that makes that previous approach work is that for schools, everyone is on a very predictable year. Like the school year starts or either July 1st or August 1st, like in terms of its, fiscal calendar. New heads of school come in at one time, that's July 1st. Chaplains come in at one time, it's July 1st. So when we send a welcome, materials in the fall, we know that we're getting all new people at approximately the same time in their, new job roles. So that's very predictable, and that's sort of allowed for that to happen. The big problem was, so rectors, who are the parish priests at, the sponsoring organizations for most of our schools, they do not follow that calendar. They move around when there's an opening, when they feel called to move. So there is not that same, ease of workflow in creating like, this is what we do in September. We send out these, materials. But so they were not really getting much of our onboarding stuff, but they're a critical demographic because A, they can be a decision maker, but B, they're also from, outside the school world and, perhaps have somewhat of a skepticism about like what we do, what schools, schools can be a stressful thing to operate, for instance. So it's, they're a sort of an important group to get, and yet they're also hard to get. So one of our main goals was to get them to sign up for a webinar that we offer every year, which is usually our, has been historically our main sort of first contact with them is this webinar, but we wanted to sort of preempt that and get, more of them plugged into that webinar and before.
So Jonathan, I guess, what is it, about 18 months ago, you all decided to make the transition from physical to digital. You had the infrastructure in place. We worked with you, to make sure that your lists were in place on the Matrix Max side and on the MailChimp side. So, and then, you said, all right, let's turn this into a digital onboarding campaign. And I think, I'll tell you just a little bit of background. It really took someone like Jonathan at NAES, and remember they have 6 staff, to say, I'm going to take ownership of this, and I'm going to really work with the rest of my staff to rethink this. So, we as a digital agency can kind of get them started and say, here are the tools, but really they're the experts about what the elements of the member journey should be, what information and services need to be highlighted, and the kind of messaging that's really going to resonate with the members. And we can certainly help with that, but it's really the subject matter experts at the organization that need to think about that. So, so Jonathan, what'd you do? How'd you make it happen?
Sure. So we took the strongest elements of what the paper mailing could do, and I think a good example of that is for instance, a welcome letter. There's so much that goes into these materials that is not just sort of action driven, but also it's feelings driven. Like we want to convey a sense of welcome just as much as we want to get people to register for our events and ultimately become members. And so we went through the our paper mailing packets and sort of piece by piece and determined what works, what doesn't. Obviously you can send 5 books in a envelope, you can't send 5 books in an email, or can you? We'll get to that. But yeah, so it was basically going through sort of item by item and figuring out how would this translate into a digital format that would work just as well, if not better, in that way.
And I think so, and this is key, right? Like you said, hey, what are the elements of the paper mailing? What do we want to convey? And then how do we take each of those things and turn them into a single email? And Jonathan, I think there's an important bullet point here, which was tailoring the content of
Right.
emails for each audience, because what you didn't do was say, hey, let's send everybody the same email. So how did you decide which audiences to cultivate, and how do you tailor that?
Right. So the paper mailings were going to two sort of key demographics. One being the head of school, the other being chaplains, who are frequently our most engaged members. The chaplains also have very particular responsibilities in defining or assisting with the elements of school life that are really key to being an Episcopal school versus any other sort of independent school. And so, connecting with those chaplains is very important. So that's why they were, on that list. And then, like as I mentioned before, the other group that we wanted to bring into this was the rectors. And so for each group, we're trying to figure out, exactly what content we want to put in front of them. And also to a degree, what language is going to appeal most to that group. For instance, heads of school often are not coming from sort of an Episcopal background, but are coming from, maybe another independent school or something like that. So we want to make sure that, the language that we use, the resources or, the content that we put in front of them is, most well suited to someone who is maybe learning a whole new vernacular in their sort of school life. As Joanna, as you mentioned, with your associate at the school your son goes to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really key. So I'll just give you a quick example. So we talked about the importance of the biennial conference. And what NAES did is they said, look, everybody needs to attend biennial, but they need to attend for different reasons. So the head of the school should attend biennial for these reasons, and these are the sessions that are going to be really of greatest significance to them and greatest value. But if you're a rector or a chaplain, here's why you should attend biennial, and here's what's important to you. So it wasn't the same message. It was a highly tailored message. And again, this takes time. But if you're a head of a school and you're getting a message that's very tailored for you, it feels very warm, very welcoming, and very intentional. And I think that's been really key to the success of this campaign. So now we're going to talk about the nuts and bolts of the campaign. So sit back, because Jonathan's going to share his secrets. So Jonathan, talk to us about this. Like, first, there's a schedule.
Yeah. So our initial, obviously, once you've broken down the elements of what you want to include, you need to separate it into the individual emails. We launched the campaign. Basically, I think I think there are a couple of different campaigns, so they have slightly different numbers, but sort of 6 or 7 emails spread out every other 2 weeks, with one final email that was scheduled about 3 months after the prior email, so that you could have your sort of onboarding campaign as well as a mid-year check-in, I think is what I called it in my workflow. But obviously the goal there is you want to make sure that you're frequent enough that people don't forget about you, but not so frequent that you get people unsubscribing or just tuning you out.
And Jonathan, when you started the campaign, the emails were going monthly, and we decided that was not frequent enough.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and you mentioned this before, not all the emails are really about action. So you don't have to pitch or, kind of promote a product or a service and get somebody to buy with every single email. I think what you were really going for was, hey, welcome to the association. You're now part of this community, and we're here to serve you. And some of those emails performed very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the first message.
Sure. So this was like the most obvious sort of direct correlation between, an item that was included in our welcome packet was like, a message of welcome. And so that was, fairly easy to to sort of make that translation. But so as you can see in the bubbles there, it's tailored content for the for the particular demographic that it's going to. You can see we've included merge tags there to. We'll talk more about personalization in a second. But yeah, and as Joanna mentioned, like it's much more focused on an emotional response versus driving clicks. As it happens, this particular email did end up driving some clicks, and obviously there you can see there is linked content there, but that was not the principal goal of it.
But take a look at this. It says, in the meantime, I hope you'll consider watching this free recorded webinar for new Episcopal school chaplains. So this is clearly targeting the chaplains. This is not the message that's going to go to the heads. And it just feels very, it feels, again, very personalized and not generic. And here are more examples, right, of how you customize it. And this is, so the important thing to note here, Jonathan, is that you got to have your data in the database be very clean, and you got to have that data get sent over to your email platform, your marketing automation platform, so that you can put it into the merge tags. And then what you ended up doing is look at this. So it doesn't just say, hey, please check out our calendar of events. You've got it customized for each group, a webinar for new Episcopal school chaplains and a webinar for new heads of school. So very intentional and very customized. So talk to us about this one.
Right. So our next email, and this one is very much. Oops, sorry, I just moved my own slides over. This one is very much geared towards calls to action. I thought that I think we've accidentally sort of maybe cut off the bottom chunk of the email that actually has the call to action buttons on it, but you can sort of see the top there where it says, watch the NAES webinar for new chaplains. There are sort of 3 or 4 items below that are sort of, here's this particular resource for chaplains. Here's like the chaplains mentoring program. Here is some information on like the chaplains retreat. So this particular email was all geared towards putting really specific, calls to action in front of people. And obviously with a little bit of preamble, but, again, not too much, because that's not the point in this regard.
Take a look at this. It says, making the most of membership. So again, it's being intentional. Here's how you can make the most of membership. Part 1 of 5, and then 4 or 5 resources highly relevant for chaplains. So now you're thinking, wow, this association is all about me, right? Because here are resources in the library. Here's a webinar. Here's a discussion list. There's just a lot of resources just for me.
Yeah. Do we want to move to the next one?
Do you see this one, making the most of membership?
Oh, sorry. That's the problem when they all look similar. Yeah. So this one is, not necessarily driven to an action, but really seeking to inform. And this one does include links for like again, it's sort of cut off at the bottom, but you can see resource library, things like that do have a link, but they're not necessarily trying to get someone to register for something or download something. It's really about being like, this is what we do, which is, I'm sure this is a universal problem with associations. Joanna, you can probably speak to this, but a big problem that associations face with member attrition is people will say, well, I just didn't really know what I was getting for my money. Why would I be part of this? And it's like, well, we sent you blah, 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 but people don't necessarily, not everyone's going to open every email, and so, this is sort of our attempt to get people while they're fresh and really get the broad synopsis of like, what can we do for you, like early.
Yeah, I actually, and you said, hey, these emails look the same, and they sort of look the same, but they sort of don't. And that's one thing that actually I want to say. When you're creating these emails, if you can make them look distinctive with a graphic, with a different headline, etc. That actually kind of, tells people in their brains when they see it, this is a different email, I should pay attention. So that's one of my tips. But the one thing that I also find with these different automation campaigns is that if you don't use an intentional campaign like this, and what happens is somebody joins, they get the welcome packet, and then they immediately start getting all the emails. What they're getting is the most current stuff. They hear about the upcoming conference and this new publication. What they don't necessarily hear is about the publication that came out 2 years ago that's still relevant and for them. Because you're not promoting something that you published 2 years ago, but that might be the signature publication that's going to keep them being a member. So in the case of NAS, for example, I love the reason for being, publication. And that, I don't think you update it very often. And so it's not something that's necessarily new, but so timely for any new member. So that's an example of something you'll highlight in a new member campaign, but you won't necessarily highlight it in a new member newsletter, which I recommend you do anyway, because you want to be promoting those oldies but goodies. But not everybody does, because it's not necessarily timely.
Especially when when content is old enough that people don't remember that it exists, it's a great thing to throw into a newsletter. And we do this fairly frequently. We'll take an old article, post it, and we'll get so much positive feedback and clicks on something that we did 2 years ago, and but people are engaging with it because it's still relevant.
Yeah, exactly. Now take a look at this email. Now it says part 3 of 5, right? So I'm looking at this email and thinking, part 3, did I miss one? I might go back to my email to find it. But even the title is customized. Complimentary NAS publications for new Episcopal school chaplains. So it's publications and it's for chaplains. So very intentional. And you got a goodie in this email.
Yeah, so this actually is nice, convenient you mentioned the reasons for being publication, but so in the whole, well, there are two factors going into this email. One was, how do you send a physical book by email? You can't. So we wanted to be able to get these publications to people, but obviously not by mailing like 30 or 50 or whatever out. And then the other part of it is we wanted to get people aware that the store exists. And especially with the new website, the store enhancement was actually something we've been planning on for a really long time, and but launched with the new website. And so what we did was allow people to basically order the book for free. Actually, you get 2 books, but order these books for free from the website. So obviously now they know the store exists. They can see that there are other items in the store. And then the other side benefit to that is we're only sending out books to people who A, want them, and and then B, won't be surprised when this like publication shows up and they're like, I have no idea why I'm getting this.
Right.
So it definitely sort of kills multiple birds with one stone there.
Jonathan, I'm going to move us along. So here's the selected publications, and I like how they crossed out, the price that shows free. And then I think the other benefit is they have to log into the website. So now they're, you're making sure that they have a login, because they've got to claim it, because this is this is done through the store. And this one is just terrific. It's like, how do we communicate with you? And you're being really intentional. You're saying, hey, here's how we communicate with you. We've got our network, we've got the prayer, we've got the newsletter, we've got the mid-month missive. So you're telling them about the publications.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it looks like the styles got dropped from the headings here. But so this is again more of an awareness email, but this is to counteract the like, why am I getting this? Feeling of certain emails. Because like Joanna mentioned, when you are new and you get sort of dumped into the main mailing list, you start to get things that are definitely timely, but not necessarily, it's not necessarily clear why you're getting something. And so this this email actually directly correlated with a paper flyer that we had as well. But this email is to try and counteract that as well.
And I love this one. I think this one is highly open. This is basically introducing the staff and talking about, how to get in touch with them. I mean, it just feels very personal. Instead of like, hey, call the main line, like this is the staff, call us if you need us.
And that's definitely like a hallmark of what we do, is we really try to be like, the personal touch association. I think this probably isn't a slide, so I'm sorry if I'm jumping the gun on it, but like one of the things that, really sort of enhances, this welcome process is like, we're a small enough an association that our executive director will call new heads of school and welcome them to the world of Episcopal schools, as well as sort of getting the letters. So we really try and make it obvious that if you need something, email us directly. We're here.
Yeah, and I find that because we've done other new member onboarding campaigns, this email gets kept. In fact, one of the things you can do is say, hey, here's who you need to, here are the folks at the association who are here to help. Save this email, and you'll find that email gets opened. So, and then you've got this mid-year check-in, right? And I'll tell you, Dan Heischman is an amazing executive director. He's very warm. He knows his members. I've seen him in action during board meetings. And when my son's school had a new head, actually maybe about 6 months later, I said, Mrs. Adams, do you know about NAES? And she said, oh yes. And she said, I even got a welcome call, from Dan Heischman. So what a wonderful feeling to get a call from somebody who's very respected in the community, who clearly kind of has his finger on the pulse of all the movements within his community. Very nice touch.
And this was one of those things that there was absolutely, no direct correlation with in the original, like, sort of onboarding, packet, because everything was sent all at once. And the nice thing with this is you can, automate it. So now, as for our, chaplains and heads that start their school year very predictably, this sort of falls kind of at the same time for approximately for everyone. But the nice thing with the automation is you set it up so if someone joins, in October or something like that, they don't get the mid-year check-in a month later. They get it 3 months later. So, so that's like the really nice thing with being able to automate, as sort of the series of emails.
All right. So one of the things we want to talk about is that if you're going to have successful onboarding, clean data is really, really key, because there's nothing worse than getting an email that has wrong information. It's got the wrong title, it's got your wrong name, all that stuff. So, so how do you do it, Jonathan?
Sure, and this is the labor-intensive part, and we have a great person on staff who is really, really diligent through Google Alerts or on research. She will basically keep a running list of every leadership transition, both in our members and potential members, which is that's not something you can really automate away, unfortunately. Is just the diligence of really constantly checking. Matrix Max has some great tools, because you can assign tasks and reminders to a specific profile of an organization. So if someone is leaving their position in July, you can add a reminder to check back, after that point and see who the new leader is, for instance. So like that's a really useful thing. And I know that's something that she uses a lot, is that ability. Constantly. Like literally every day, it's like here's like 6 new reminders of a leadership transition that is coming up. So it's a lot of sort of just research and following up.
And I think when clients say, "Oh my God, this is a lot of work," I'll say, yes, it is a lot of work. But if the results are such that you're getting the type of engagement that you really want, then isn't it worth the effort? Because now you kind of onboarded new members really well. and they're so much more engaged. So, the thing that's key here is you've got clean data, and what they do is they create these clean lists in Matrix Max, and in Matrix Max you can create these dynamically generated lists. So he's got a list of heads and chaplains, right?
Yes, and those are ones that are updated manually based on sort of the research. And again, because everyone changes at approximately the same time, it's somewhat easy. I shouldn't say easy, but it's somewhat manageable to be able to keep tabs on everyone, because we basically have, new heads for X fiscal year, and then, everyone's starting about the same time, which happens to be our fiscal year too. So it actually is that is something that helps keep it manageable. But the rectors, because they change all over the place, and they're also much less sort of or the leadership transitions in the rectors are much harder to sort of keep track of. But we do find a lot of rectors will add themselves to the database. And so I have an automated search criteria that basically anyone whose title is rector, they get automatically pulled into this new list, and then they get added to the MailChimp automation campaign.
And this is where the magic comes in, right? So there's a list in Matrix Max that they're maintaining manually, dynamically, et cetera. It's got a corresponding list in MailChimp. And what happens is when a new person gets added to that list and those lists are synced, the automation kicks in. Because MailChimp says, oh, there's a new person on this list, so I should kick off the automation. So if somebody adds herself to the database, she's got a title of rector, those lists get synced, MailChimp says, oh, there's a new rector, I kick it off. And that's really where the magic comes in. So that's something that is available in a lot of membership databases these days. Almost every system has either a third-party system that they integrate with, or they've got it built in. So Jonathan, you want to talk about personalization?
Sure, yeah. And this all ties back to having the clean data, because obviously if you don't have clean data, you can't do any of this personalization. But we try to make sure that every email is addressed personally. I try and drop like one reference to their organization or job title within that email as well. Again, it's just to drill home the fact that we know who you are, and we want to support you in your specific role. The challenge though is if you do too much of that, you sort of cross over the line from being personal and friendly into creepy and right. We're spying on you and know about all your data and stuff like that. And so I don't have a good sort of rule on that, other than you know it when you see it. Joanna, I don't know if you have a better way of putting that.
Different people have different thresholds for creepy. Like I think when you're doing things like, hey, dear Joanna, welcome to your new role, and I mean, I think that's definitely wonderful. But, creepy is when it's like, oh, I see that you visited this page on our website and you did this and this. And then you're like, wait, are you tracking everything that I do? Even if you are doing that, I think you want to, take a look at it and say, does this look like we're tracking too much information? And I think that's where it gets creepy.
And I think a good metric, and there is an example of this later on, but people do respond to these emails when they're personalized like this as if they were a direct email.
Absolutely.
And so if you're getting responses organic, like people are responding in an organic way to an email that they think seems organic too, that's a good indicator that it's the balance is good.
And I think the other thing is that the messages just have to be good messages, right? How many of us have seen clearly automated messages that they're just, the English is crappy, it doesn't look very authentic, and you think, Jesus, this was automated? What kind of thought went into this? So what NAES is doing is really combining the power of the automation with genuinely nice, helpful messages. But check out just what he did here. So what he has done is he's put in a level of personalization, but he's also put in basically error checking, so that if you have missing data, it defaults to something that isn't awkward.
Right, and that's so. So this is actually an excerpt from a different email, but it's one that sort of demonstrates exactly that. But yeah, exactly. So if they're we want to have a different message go out to someone who is a member versus a non-member. For instance, if you look at the bottom, so this is using MailChimp's else if conditional merge tags, which means if it's one thing, it'll say one thing. If it's option B, it'll say one thing, or it'll say option C versus option A or option B. So it allows you to have three versions. You just have to sort of be intentional about sort of ranking them in the order that, if one thing is not true, then the other thing has to sort of be subsequent to that. It's probably easier to look at it than me
but
talk
look
through
at the top,
it.
right? Even that one, it says, dear, if nickname, then insert the nickname. And so there's a nickname field in Matrix Max. And if like it's blank, then do dear friend. So it's not blank. It doesn't say dear blank. It says dear friend, which is fine. Or it says dear Jonathan.
And so a good example of the else if is at the bottom. You can see it says, if member type is member, then actually say nothing, because this is the bottom line is basically, how do you know that you're not a member? So if your member type is member, it doesn't say this. However, if your member type is, or if you're not a member but your organization type is ECUSA school, which is an Episcopal school, then it will come up with, your organization is not a member of NAES, and then if it's neither of those things, it'll again say nothing. But the critical thing is here, like if your org type is a school, then you must have an org name. So you don't need to necessarily check that you have an org name in that case, which is why you don't have like if org name. I may not be making a lot of sense, Joanna, so maybe.
No, I think it just makes a lot of sense. And I think that the most important thing here is you got to have the data, and NAES, they're just sticklers for good data, right? So that's the first thing. But the second thing is then figure out where you want to put in this conditional formatting, and then really try and catch all of the conditions. And in the case of NAES, because we've got this integration between Matrix Max and MailChimp, they don't have to manually be importing all that data. It's a click of a button. And we very carefully worked with them to figure out what fields get sent over, because sometimes with these generic integrations, you've got first name, last name, and email, but we're clearly sending over things like member type, member status, and organization name, etc.
And actually, I'm one of the things I'm working on right now is a membership campaign. So not onboarding, but actually, driving membership. And the conditional merge tags I'm using there, it will also allow for you to basically within one message, so you don't even have to set up multiple flows if you don't want to. Within one message, you can have a message that goes to churches and a message that goes to schools, in our case, or whatever equivalent your association has. But when a church person is going to respond to a certain message, then it's good to be able to drill down into that in that language. So here is what the all those merge tags on the previous slide look like when they're actually displayed. And as you can see, the overall message is actually a lot shorter than what it looked like it was going to be. But you can see the organizational personalization there, but then and then you can also see that non-member message.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So Jonathan, we're running out of time. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the results, and then we're going to skip over to lessons learned.
Sure.
So, but check this out. So here are the results, and Jonathan, walk us through these amazing stats.
Sure. And this is chaplains. Like I said, they're definitely our sort of most engaged group. But for us to be able to get, a 90% open rate on, that initial welcome message, which was, all about feel, is really great, just to be able to know that people have seen the message. But the other the other thing I found really interesting is, and this is mirrored a little bit in the other campaigns too, is that first email was really about welcoming. It was not about driving clicks, and yet we still have a 20% click rate, which is, a really really nice surprise. And then obviously you can see with the next one, which was targeted towards getting clicks, we're up to almost 50% there.
So, and take a look at this. Now, granted, they don't have new chaplains. They don't have chaplains in the hundreds and the thousands, but to get a 90% open is pretty amazing, which means that really the vast majority of the people on this list are opening the email. And I'll tell you that what we have found, we do new member onboarding campaigns for other organizations where hundreds of people are getting added every month, if not thousands, that we're not getting 90%, but we're getting 55%, we're getting 60%, we're getting 45%. And those are still really amazing numbers. So what these clients tell us is, wow, if I get 50%, 60% engagement from these new members over the course of the campaign, I have done such a much better job of really educating my new members about all the things that we do for them. So again, just take a look at these emails and you'll see the member services overview didn't get the same open, but to get a 65% open, this is for a different audience. This is for a different audience. So I mean, just the open rates are just really pretty staggering. So Jonathan, just really quickly too, the email responses from members is very high. People just respond to the emails, right?
They do, and the next slide has one of those responses on it, so I'll show you that in a second. But yeah, so we definitely noticed a large uptick, and we can track through UTM codes. When people register for an event, it goes through Matrix Max, and so it all plugs back to that same, that same personal profile is associated with how they click. But the we saw a fairly large uptake in event registrations, which was definitely in part thanks to this automation. I mean, a jump from what was typically the new rectors webinar, for instance, usually had 7, 8, 9 attendees. Last year it had close to 20. There's a couple of other factors in that, like we've activated another Matrix Max tool that allows for one-click registration. So if you're signed in, you just click, and then if it's a free event, it's just you're done, you're registered. So removing obstacles to the conversions has really helped as well. But so yeah, so it's definitely been successful from that standpoint. If you can go to the next slide, this is just, I mean, we have several emails like this. This just happens to be sort of the most sort of involved one, but this is a response to one of those welcome letters, and so I think this is a good example of something that it demonstrates that if you personalize well without going beyond the creepy factor, people will interact with you like you took the time to manually type out their name and the message and everything.
Absolutely. So this is from a different campaign. This is a new member onboarding campaign that we do for the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. And in this case, a very visual presentation, different headers. We find that that's really doing that. And if you take a look, so far, 1,500 new apprentices since November 19, average open rate 39%, best open rate on one email 67%, and the open rate averages are increasing with each email send. And so we really attribute that to one, kind of the timeliness of the emails. The other thing is obviously the emails are they're short, they're punchy. And we also integrated with the training directors and said to the training directors, look, tell your apprentices to read the emails. So everything working together and is really educating these new members. All right, so I'm going to breeze through this. What not to do. Having bad data is really terrible. Sending it to people who have no idea, who your organization is, visually consistent, no cost to action. So don't be doing that stuff. And then we're going to talk about lessons learned, and I think we might even be able to get through these slides, Jonathan. So was I taking this one or were you taking this
Oh,
one?
you were going to do this one.
I was taking this one. Okay, so here's some lessons learned. The thing is, what you want to do is pick the most important people to cultivate. Don't try and cultivate everybody. I think you kind of make your new member onboarding campaign just too daunting from the beginning. So I say start with a small campaign and then just keep adding to it. So you might say the most important decision maker is the owner, maybe the head of the school, or maybe it's the training director. And let's start with a really small campaign, say 4 messages, say 6 emails, and then just keep adding to it with all of these different systems. You might say, you know what, we're going to insert a different email. I always say be conversational and authentic with the messaging, and that then kind of begs for people to respond because the message just seems so authentic, and it is because someone actually wrote it. It just a computer just happened to have sent it. Individually design each email for maximum impact so that they look visually different, but also so that the messaging is very unique. And then you can even use automation for non-email tasks. So I know at Matrix Group, we actually have a new client onboarding. And one of the things that we do is there's an email that goes out that says, hey, this client's been a client for 3 months, call to check in, see how things are going. And then the last thing is clean data is absolutely key. Your campaign will absolutely, flub and just fail if you don't have clean data. And where it falls down is if you have clean data and a lack of use cases for this. So for example, if you're a trade association and you're cultivating new people at member organizations, if they're coming from a previous, from an organization that was previously a member, the messaging might have to be different, right? Because if it says, welcome, thanks for becoming a member, they might say, well, I've been a member for 20 years. Because they were with a previous member, with a previous company that was a member. So you want to make sure that you develop these use cases and then make sure that you have the data to really support it. So, Jonathan, you all have some really big goals for your campaign in the future.
Yeah, so when I revamp this campaign in the fall, I definitely want to be able to have, MailChimp will allow you to have multiple sort of logical progressions around each email. And so I do want to, have it so it loops back and we'll send an email. And you can do this manually anyway, but you can have it loop back and it automatically send, basically this, you would set it up to be the same email with probably a different subject line and send that to basically anyone who didn't open the email the first time it went out. So that's just another way to catch people who didn't get it the first time. And then the other thing I really want to sort of add into this campaign is basically for like the chaplains and other groups that aren't decision makers, but are very engaged, to give them resources that they can use to sort of petition the people who are decision makers to join NAES for their benefit.
Convince your boss email. That's totally awesome. All right, so we always end every Matrix Group webinar with an action plan because we've thrown a lot out at you, and I hope that you all will download the slides and really take a look at these emails to see the magic that NAES has really infused into these emails. So here's our action plan. The first thing you want to do is check your tech ecosystem because you may already have onboarding capabilities. If you've got MailChimp, if you've got Informs, if you've got Real Magnet, if you've got HubSpot, these are all marketing automation platforms. The second thing is start a small campaign. Like I said, one decision maker or all the staff, and just maybe not customize it too much. 4 to 6 emails, that's it. Monitor your campaign weekly. And then see if over time you can really add to the campaign. You might say, that's going really well. I want to add an additional message, or that's going really well. Let's tackle the vice presidents of supply chain. Let's tackle the directors of safety, whatever it is. The thing that I always say is, and Jonathan is good about this, is take a look at the messaging and update it once a month. So I know that NAES, leading up to biannual, they've got messaging about biannual, and then after biannual, because it's not going to happen for another couple of years, they change the messaging so that it doesn't seem awkward and clearly it doesn't, the message. So then the messages really just aren't wrong or inappropriate.
A similar note, like once you have all our early messages are geared to getting people registered for a live webinar. Obviously, once that webinar has happened, going in, flipping that to be watch this webinar recording, for instance.
Yeah, amazing, right? So the care that goes into this this isn't a, kind of put it in and forget it. This is a tweak it on a regular basis, but it doesn't have to be as labor intensive as the first time around. And then finally, just review your campaigns every 6 months and see, are you getting the opens that you want? And I always say, what kinds of tweaks and changes can you make to see if you can make, increase the opens, increase the clicks, increase the interactions. You might say, you know what, I've got a little bit of capacity. I'm going to change the headers on some of these emails. What would happen if we changed the from, field? What would happen if we changed the greeting on some of these? So I always say, if you've attended any of our webinars, I always say that what you want to be doing is kind of testing and tweaking to see what kind of result that you get. So start small and then just keep adding to it. Brian, what kind of questions do we have? I saw a couple people raise their hands, and look at that. It is 12:01. I'm so sorry. We're running behind.
Yeah. I kind of highlighted a couple of things that came up between chat and QA. I think this one might be for both of you, and it was regarding specifically the email or the messaging creation on the individual mails in the chain. Is there any thought or any idea on how many links to include in the email so it's not overwhelming to encourage folks to actually click and visit what you're trying to say? Any food for thought or rule of thumb in that regard?
So Jonathan, how many emails in your campaign?
About 7.
Okay, so you've got 7, and it's about a 90-day campaign, right?
Something like that, yeah.
So I think that's a good start and a good campaign, actually. Like we said, we think that it's the first 90 days. For the painters, the campaign is actually, I think it's 26 emails or 24 emails over the course of a year. And that's, it's a big cultivation, but remember, their commitment is much bigger. It's like a 3-year apprentice program, and they have a lot that they really wanted to educate the apprentices on. And then it culminates in that anniversary message at the end of the campaign. I like starting off with 4 to 6 messages and then adding as you have capacity and as you see the results.
In each one of those messages, is it a case where you want to just provide a link or two to highlight like 1 or 2 different aspects of?
I think it depends on the email. If it depends what your goal is. If your goal is to have this email sort of serve as a little, a hub where people can choose what they want and sort of get a wide exposure. But if you really want to drive, registrations for a specific event, for instance, like one button.
Yeah, I agree with Jonathan. I think if you pile on the messaging in each email, then I think you're doing, what we always do, which is, hey, welcome to the membership, and then you kind of vomit all over them, right? So I think if you can make each message very targeted with a very descriptive subject line, you're more likely to get an open, because people will see, oh, this is short, I can consume this. Brian, any more?
Yeah, Joanna, I think this one's a little bit more geared for you. So very appreciative of this whole example. I had a question that came up in regard to organizations that are individual based as opposed to focusing on title over an organizational member. What's the food for thought or any tips for dealing with organizations and matrix mix specifically, in creating a campaign like this?
Sure. So if you're a professional society and your members are individuals, then instead of thinking about the decision maker, maybe what you do is just a general new member campaign, but maybe personalize it based on the role, based on the industry, based on the job level, based on the tenure within the profession. So what we'll find is with some of our professional society clients, they might have a student, different member types based on different, different member types. So they might have a student member, a government member, a clinical member, and a researcher member. And those different member types really kind of align with maybe different things that they're interested in, within the association. So maybe have one campaign for all the members, but then customize the webinar that you focus on, customize the resources that you are highlighting in your store, customize different aspects of your magazine based on the member type. I've seen it done with job level, CEO, director, VP level, and then maybe folks who are managers, folks who are new to the position. Sometimes I've seen even a geographic component to some of the campaigns. Brian, before we take questions, I want to make sure before people drop off that we have our next webinar. This one, I hope you won't miss. It's with Terry Carden, from 100 reviews, and it's called Wow Your Virtual Attendees and They'll Beg for More. This is going to be an amazing webinar, and we're going to be sharing the lessons that we're learning about how to put on a really successful, high impact and transformational event, even though it's virtual. The other thing that I want to let folks know is that Matrix Group has a new virtual meeting platform called Bespeak, powerful cloud native. These are the things that you can do: live and recorded sessions, attendee search, virtual trade show, chat and discussion forums, and even our own web conferencing platform. And what's really pretty key is that we will integrate with Matrix Max or actually any AMS so that you don't have to keep logging into the different services of the virtual meeting, and it's single identity. So when I log in as Joanna Pineda, I am Joanna Pineda in the chat, in the web conference rooms, etc. Plus, because it's Matrix, we want, we'll work with you to make sure that it's a really beautiful experience. So if you have to drop off, here's contact information for us. We are both happy to take questions about marketing automation. We know that this is an area that's really just kind of very ripe for a lot of effort, and we're just delighted to share what we know. Brian, any more questions?
Yeah, I had one other one that kind of came up that was kind of interesting as well. I know we touched base on this about this a little bit in the specific case of this conversation, but it was more on responsibilities of setting up MailChimp. Jonathan, did you handle all that? Matrix Group, how much involvement was there, and how can we assess or share responsibilities in setting up the actual campaign in MailChimp?
Well, it's actually our use of MailChimp actually predates me being at NAES. So Joanna, why don't you go on that?
Yeah, so when NAES first started using MailChimp, we assisted with that. Because prior to that, I can't even remember. I think emails were getting sent out directly from the mail system. And we said, hey, we really ought to use MailChimp because you'll get better recording and better templating. And we assisted with some of the initial templates, and we certainly assisted with the creation of the initial lists in Matrix Max and the lists in MailChimp to make sure that you've got that proper syncing. And then we provided a lot of training to the staff about how to set up these lists, how to make them really work for you, and then we provided training on how to use MailChimp. And then afterwards, we really, Jonathan took over, and we do very little on these campaigns. He really makes use of MailChimp, creates these templates himself. And then, when he has questions about how to use some of the tools, he'll reach out. But it's really Jonathan doing the bulk of the work. So, Brian, any more questions?
I think we're
so let me just say
away.
this, one more thought on that. If you are a Matrix Max client and you need assistance, we can provide you with training. These are some of the questions that you can ask during a free upcoming Q&A session. We've got support articles in the support center about how to do this. Certainly, you can contact us if you need assistance, and Jana will be glad to help you. If you're not a Matrix Max client, all of the things that we've talked about are going to be available to you through your association management system and likely your email platform these days, because most of them now have marketing automation capabilities. And if you need any help, we are here. We are so happy. We've set up these campaigns with other AMSs and with other mail platforms. And with that, it is 12:09. I appreciate everyone giving us the extra time. I want to thank Jonathan for being an amazing client and an amazing partner during this webinar, and for sharing everything that he's doing, because it's so amazing.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And everybody have a terrific day. Be safe. Bye-bye.
Bye.